Dwicky Kourniady says, "Hi guys, in some of the previous podcasts you guys mentioned about how Zidane was really suffering from doing press conferences. Recently, a famous tennis player, Naomi Osaka, made a decision to not attend press conferences anymore for her mental health reasons. She eventually got fined and withdrew from French Open because of that reason, even though many people are supporting her decision. Do you think maybe FIFA should give the manager an option to not doing press conferences because the job itself, without the media duty, have already given them huge pressure? And we can really see from Koeman, for example, who was hospitalized due to anxiety, although I'll just interject here, it's been proven to be untrue. It shows how the job's pressure can do to someone's health. What do you guys think?"
I don't think Zidane was a fan of press conference, but I don't think he suffered anything similar to what Osaka described. And to be honest, I haven't watched a single second of Osaka's press conferences in the past, so I don't really know how she behaved during those, or whether or not she was actually suffering a lot in the past, or whether or not it's a thing that came up suddenly in recent time or whatever. But I just think that Zidane wasn't a fan of press conference. I don't think he suffered in any way anything particularly tough or difficult to deal with during the press conferences. Is that Zidane? I don't think he was. I think he was. He has always been a very shy person, and he was just not comfortable in front of the media, and that was about it. And in terms of Zidane, I think.
I actually think he really hated it more than you're making it out to be. I think it was like the worst part of the job for him. But I also think this is a tricky one. I do genuinely don't like the way we run the press conferences now. I think it's the way the NBA does it is more healthy because they get the press conference, but at the same time, there's just more access to the players. And not in like a in-your-face type of way, but it's like there's actual good relationships between journalists and players. You can go in the locker room, you can go in the scrums, you can interact with them. It's healthy. I don't think it's in an intrusive way. I also believe that, the more you limit access, the more I think those questions in the press conference are going to be possibly more needy and bad, because
Right.
I think they're going to be desperate to get something out of them. The other thing is that I do believe that we shouldn't force anyone to do anything. I support Osaka because I completely, I'm a human. We're all human. None of us should have to go through this grueling exercise if it destroys our mental health. And so I think we should have a choice. One thing that the club will do, Lucas, and most clubs do this, I think, is that for the Champions League, for example, we don't know who does the player press conference, right? They kind of will just send out whoever. I think I'd be okay if they decided to go that route where they were depending on the game, depending on the mood, depending on the feeling, and depending on who wants to do it, they could send different people out instead of Zidane if they wanted to. I'd be okay with that. I suppose
It was like that 10 years ago, Killian. Real Madrid had not 10 years, but 12. Back in 2000, before Mourinho arrived in Pellegrini's era, Real Madrid had a press conference every day, and the players would just rotate, and then the coach would do the pre-match press conference and post-match press conference. But on regular weekdays, the players would take turns and answer questions, and that's why some of the legendary answers from Guti and all that happened in the press rooms, and that's how it worked. And ultimately, the whole system changed for every club in La Liga. And I agree with you; it might actually hurt the club, the way the press conference are handled right now. Yeah.
I think it totally depends. It's weird because covering Real Madrid for a living, our universe is a little bit different than the universes of different clubs, because when it's Zidane as your manager, you honestly come away with it at the end thinking, well, what was the point of that? We just wasted everyone's time. Nothing we learned.
Yeah.
We didn't learn anything new. We spent a bunch of resources. And by we, I mean as a society, we spend all these resources to send all these people to these press conferences. There's these big offices. I'm just on my laptop attending, or I'm just sitting in a chair. So it's not like But I'm talking about like everyone else is there with like huge, heavy camera equipment. There's offices. There's like, people back and forth with huge microphones. Like this is a lot to get nothing. And so I think but if you're like covering Manchester City, for example, or Liverpool, you actually get a lot out of those press conferences, a lot of great quotes and a lot of great information. So it's we're talking about different things. And if you have Mourinho as a coach, God, that's like you're getting ton of stuff. So it depends on the coach. But I guess my point is like, I think it's fine to have a mandate that, the coaches have to attend and you have to have media availability. I'm not against that. But I also think we're allowed to be lenient if a player or a coach really is going through something. Like we shouldn't fine them for that if they don't want to show up for those reasons. You know what I mean? I feel like a little bit, we don't need to be as strict with it. Osaka raised awareness that maybe we need to loosen this a little bit.
Yeah, but if you lose it, then nobody will attend the press conference. I mean, nobody enjoys them.
I don't know. I think some people do enjoy them. Or maybe
I don't know.
Or maybe you're allowed to have like mental health breaks from it. It's a tricky one. I agree it's a tricky one. I think there are a lot of people who love to be in front of the camera and the microphone. And
yeah, well, Ibrahimovic for sure, and Mourinho, but they're the minority here. I don't think more than a handful of coaches in La Liga enjoy being in front of the media, and I think most of them will skip the press conference if actually given the chance. I think that's how I feel about it. And then obviously you have to mention also the media and all. It's a tricky one. Again, mental health should be above everything else, but there are plenty of other things to consider here as well. It's a tricky question. It's tough.
I think it would also be a lot easier if our culture was healthier too. And by that I mean, and Matt and I talked about this on Tuesday, like if the questions were better, the coaches would have more incentive to sit there, but the questions suck. Not all questions. Yeah, I'm not generalizing. I just think if the way we consumed the media and if we were interested in football more than drama, which unfortunately I don't think humans are wired that way biologically. They're just not. So because we consume it that way, it's also more taxing on everyone to have to, that's part of the reason why it's not enjoyable for a lot of people. But hey, man, Carlo had fun yesterday.
But the club has responsibility on that particular topic as well.
That's true.
Where does Florentino go to do their interviews? To El Chiringuito? Who gets a regular question in every single press conference? El Chiringuito and the ones asking about the controversies about Bale and all that. So the club has responsibility on this particular topic as well.
Well, that's a great point. But look at the guy, and I don't like name dropping, so I won't. Everyone who watches these press conferences know who I'm talking about probably. But the one guy who always, usually at the end of the press conference, is the one that Zidane really hated the most. And you could see it in his face when it was that guy's turn. The questions were always so bad and were always about drama, and Zidane would give him one-line answers, and they were never about football. And they would still let him and continue to ask it. So to your point, the club have a choice here.
Yeah,
they can control that to some extent. They can also say at the beginning of the press conference, questions about this only, please. No questions about this.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about censoring these particular questions or these particular journalists or whatever, but just not give them regular questions and regular turn to speak every single time, and cover some other media and see who Zidane, maybe ask Zidane himself if he actually wants to take questions from one specific media more often than others, and have the coach involved instead of keeping the same reporters involved every single time. Yeah,
I do. If I had to predict, I think we're headed toward, not just in football, I think we're headed towards sports universally. The access is going to get more and more closed as time wears on. That's my prediction. Because if you look at the evolution of it, in the NBA, it's pretty open now still relative to football. But it used to be that you could basically just go in the stadium and go wherever you want if you were a journalist. And you could go and the players smoking in the locker room and you're just there with them talking. everything was so open, and they little by little they restricted, and all it takes is for somebody like Kyrie to come up and say a bunch of stuff and just complain about media and things like that, and then a lot of these people will rise up. I think it's just going to get to a point where you're either closed off or they're really going to pick and choose who they let in.
Yeah, the media is seen as an enemy in recent times, and rightfully so. I mean, some of the questions and some of the topics asked by the reporters are definitely laughable and hurting the reputation of the whole of not only about their companies but the whole job and the whole work of journalism. So I think that we're often seen as enemies in the sports media. Yeah.
In which case, that's kind of a good thing, because that might force us to change the way we approach this stuff. And actually, if you look at the questions yesterday with Carla, they weren't that bad. They're pretty good. And so maybe Zidane's letter hit something. I don't know. All right, we got to move on. So where are we? Let's see. Okay, we're going to move a little bit faster now because we only have a few minutes. I got to go.
All
right. So Felipe Bautista says, do you guys think Ancelotti's return means Casemiro will no longer be a guaranteed starter?